College football week 12 is in the books. There has been so much chaos this season, and it continued to ensue. I want to talk about every single major conference, all of the games that took place that reshaped the trajectory of the conferences. Let's start with the ACC. Friday night, we had major action. Louisville, in my opinion, was still in the hunt for the ACC championship. Now, it was kind of a long shot, but they still were in the hunt if they could win out. However, they drop a game to Clemson late. So many undisciplined plays by Louisville. Clemson was able to come away with it despite their offensive struggles. My number one reaction to this is if Dabo Swinney keeps his job, Garrett Riley is almost for certain out as offensive coordinator there at Clemson. This was one of the most talented offenses that Clemson has ever had, and this team has just not panned out whatsoever. I thought the early season struggles could be solved later in the year, but I was 1,000% wrong about that. So first up, Louisville eliminated from ACC title contention. Clemson in the hunt for a bowl game. Next up, let's talk about Georgia Tech, Boston College. This Georgia Tech team just cannot perform against lesser competition on the road. They've seen it time and time again so far this season. They dropped a game earlier this year to lesser competition, and it certainly looked like they were going to do the exact same thing versus Boston College. Luckily for Georgia Tech and the Yellow Jackets, they were able to pull it out. That is one thing that I want to point out that is kind of a compliment. Sure, they play down to their competition. They go down late in these games, but they do have the clutch gene, right? Haynes King, Jamal Hayes, this offense has been rolling all season long. Do I give them a shot to beat Georgia? Probably not. I mean, last year seemed a little fluky in my opinion. Georgia straight up got out physical. Now, Georgia Tech is still a very physical team, but I just don't know if they are going to have the same balls bounce their way this upcoming year versus Georgia. However, it looks like they are firmly in the driver's seat for the ACC title. Speaking of the ACC title, let's talk about this Virginia versus Duke game. I am shocked, to say the least, that this Duke team has fallen apart. They've lost to UConn, Tulane. They dropped another game, and then yesterday just flat out stunk versus Virginia. I give this Virginia team a ton of compliments. They have come out and been flat against other ACC opponents, but when the moment matters most, like at home versus Florida State or this game versus Duke with the title game on the line, they perform. And now it looks like they will also be in the driver's seat to go to the conference title game because they have one last game. It's a rivalry game, but it's at home versus a pretty bad Virginia Tech team. So the conference championship in the ACC is looking like it's pretty much set up, but I'll get into my conference championship predictions in just a little bit. Last but certainly not least, let's talk about the Notre Dame versus Pitt game. Pat Narduzzi, what are you doing? For starters, comes out at the beginning of the week and says, well, we could lose to Notre Dame by 110. Doesn't matter. Not a conference game. What a terrible message to send your players. And guess what? Pitt played just like that the entire game versus Notre Dame. The Fighting Irish came out, were extremely physical. Jeremiah Love had a ton of highlight plays again, and Pitt was just flat. As a matter of fact, and not to mention, the cheap touchdown at the end, classless. Marcus Freeman definitely didn't like that. I was shocked, to say the least. Pat Narduzzi, I think he's been known as like I won't go that far. I won't try to disparage him, but he has not been known as the most classy of guys, and this kind of proves the point. Pitt's still in the ACC title hunt. They've got to beat Georgia Tech. If they can't, they're out. But for now, they are definitely still on the hunt as a 3-loss, which is pretty shocking to say the least. Now let's move on and talk about the American Conference. There were several big games there. First up, Tulane and North Texas both won their matchups in very convincing fashion. In my opinion, they're both in the driver's seat to win the conference. Now let's talk about USF Navy. USF I think they were in the driver's seat to win the conference. All they had to do was win out, and they were there. And of course, they're going to get into the college football playoffs. I mean, they have had some great games so far this season. Byron Brown has played amazingly. However, I did make a college football preview video where I talked about Navy is such a hard team to game plan against because you don't play another team like them all season long. It's hard to get scout team looks. It's hard to prepare for, and that's exactly what happened to USF's defense. Navy not only passed the ball well, but dominated, of course, in the run game. USF loses 41-38. They are out of the American Conference title hunt for now, unless something really shocking happens. Last but certainly not least, Memphis, in my opinion, could still technically be in the hunt for the conference championship game, but they drop a game versus East Carolina, which, by the way, East Carolina is now, I believe, 6-1 in conference. So they even have a shot at the conference title if North Texas or Tulane lose a game in the next couple of weeks. So really shocking result there. Memphis, after that game versus Arkansas, looked like they were actually the best group of 5 team, maybe outside of South Florida, but now it looks like all of those dreams have been dashed away, and it's time to look on to next season in terms of winning the conference. So that's the American Conference layout. Now, there's not been a lot of action in the Big 12, but I do want to talk about 2 things. Number one, Cincinnati was still in the hunt for the conference championship game. They had 1 conference loss going into this week. They had BYU on their schedule, I believe, at home later this year, which means that if they beat BYU, they could 100% go to the championship game. Now, after a upset versus Arizona, I believe at home, 30-24, those dreams are over. Now, this Cincinnati team is a little banged up. I don't want to, critique them too much. Arizona and Noah Fafita have played well above the standards that I set for them before this season started. So very proud of the Wildcats for fighting back. I'm really looking forward to seeing this Arizona State-Arizona game at the end of the year. I think that could be potentially a bid for a pretty high-tier bowl game. I'm excited to watch that one. I'll actually be there in person, so going to be a phenomenal matchup to watch. Last but certainly not least, in the Big 12, let's talk about BYU TCU. TCU has been up and down so far this season. Josh Hoover, I think, has played pretty well, but this BYU defense is so unbelievably stout. I think they're absolutely going to get that rematch versus Texas Tech. Neutral site game. It's going to be more exciting than it was versus the Red Raiders in Lubbock, but BYU overall has been unbelievably surprising in my opinion. I thought losing Jake Retzlaff to Tulane over the offseason due to all of those legal complications, I thought that was going to do BYU in, but Bo Bachmeier, the freshman quarterback, has played outstanding so far this season. And besides the Texas Tech game, BYU has dominated their opponents outside of, I guess, Arizona, who has played well above the standards, like I said. So BYU and Texas Tech look like they're 1,000% going to the conference championship game in the Big 12. 3 more conferences to cover. Let's talk about USC, Iowa in the Big 10. USC has really surprised me. Now, Lincoln Riley back at Oklahoma had several physical teams like with Joe Mixon, for example, and they were able to run the football at a surprisingly good rate for a Big 12 team. Usually when you think of like 2010's Big 12, you think passing the ball for 600 yards. Now, Baker Mayfield did that, but Lincoln Riley at USC has yet to establish that physical dominance on the offensive side of the football up until this season. They have done a phenomenal job at doing that, and they go out and they beat an extremely gritty Iowa team. Look at all of their losses. They're all 1 score outside of Ohio State. Right? They lose to Iowa State barely. They lose to Oregon on a last-second field goal, and then they lose to USC here on the road. I give this Iowa team a ton of compliments, but USC really deserves the love here. Very surprised to see how they've evolved over time with Lincoln Riley. A couple weeks ago, people were starting to talk about Lincoln Riley being on the hot seat. Right now, they're competing for a bid in the college football playoffs. So props to USC and Lincoln Riley. They've done a phenomenal job there getting this program back on track and in contention for their first college football playoff bid. Next up, let's talk about Michigan Northwestern. Michigan is 1,000% still in the playoff hunt. And if they beat Ohio State, they might be going to the Big Ten championship game. I believe they have the loss against USC, so that actually might mess things up, but we'll have to wait and see on that. But all of their future is still ahead of them. If they go 10-2, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you, they will win 1,000%, be at least number 13 in the country, if not in the top 10, looking for a playoff bid. But that all entails them beating Ohio State. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But they pull out a gutsy win versus a very underrated Northwestern team. And if you don't believe me about that, just ask Oregon, because Northwestern gave them fits earlier this year. So love USC. I thought this team played great. And then, of course, Michigan being able to pull out that gutsy win at the end. I don't think they were able to do that last year. You see the evolution in the offense as the season's gone on. Now, it's still sluggish, but come on, right? We got Justice Hayes. He's out for the year. Bryce Underwood is still a very young, developing quarterback. So give this Michigan team a little bit of a break. Even if they go 9-3, I think this was a pretty successful season. Now let's talk about the SEC. We have gargantuan matchups. First off, South Carolina went up 30-3 on Texas A&M at halftime. Now, in that period of time, I believe Texas A&M had 2 interceptions, a fumble that got returned for a touchdown, 2 50-plus yard passes for touchdowns from South Carolina, and they missed a field goal in the first half. So everything went wrong for them. Yet, in the second half, they showed you why they're a top 3 team. I do not discredit them for going down 30-3. A lot of fluky things happened in that first half. What really complements their game is how they responded there in the second half. To score 28 unanswered points, your defense to pitch a shutout versus a South Carolina offense that isn't untalented. I am surprised, to say the least. I literally messaged a group of my friends and said, this game was over. Texas A&M is done. And I was starting to think that if they go on the road to Texas, they might lose and be out of the playoffs. But look at how they responded and proved me wrong. I was very surprised, to say the least. But Texas A&M is a wonderful team in terms of having resilience. They have really answered the bell when it comes to physicality. And Mike Elko, I was starting to worry about that extension that he signed at the beginning of the week, this previous week when the news got leaked. But hey, look where they're at now. Still undefeated, still top 3 in the country. So Texas A&M continues to be resilient, physical, and they play their style of football no matter what. Now let's talk about a very similar situation. Alabama, a pick 6, a fumble, another interception, a missed field goal at the end of the half, and they dropped the game to Oklahoma. In my opinion, the difference between that game with Oklahoma and Alabama and the game with Texas A&M and South Carolina is that Oklahoma is significantly better than Alabama. Significantly better than South Carolina. Alabama, to me, showed the same resilience and effort, discipline. However, they were not able to pull it off because Oklahoma is just flat out a much better team than South Carolina. Now, there's really no excuse for this Alabama team to have lost this game. It's at home. In my opinion, you have the better offense. The defense, especially in the secondary, has been playing at a very high level. Now, Oklahoma's pass rush proved that Alabama has a weakness on their offensive line. Not to mention, Alabama has still yet to impose their will running the football, a major concern heading into the playoffs. Now, in my opinion, Alabama is still in the hunt for the conference championship game, and at the same time, 1,000% going to be in the hunt for the playoffs. There's no chance in my mind that this team gets eliminated from the playoffs based off of this loss, especially if they come out and win versus Auburn in dominant fashion. But what really concerns me is, will the playoff committee put Alabama at like 10 or 11, and then if every other team stays there, Alabama makes the conference championship game somehow and then loses that? Are they going to get bounced from the playoffs? I don't think the committee would do that, but I digress. I'm a little concerned about Alabama. They have to solve their running game issues. That's my reaction there from the Oklahoma game. Now let's talk about Texas, Georgia. I'm not going to critique Steve Sarkisian that much in this game. This has just flat out been the narrative all season long. The question was, could Texas play against an Ohio State, a Georgia, and compete? And in my opinion, the answer to that question is no. Arch Manning is not ready for the NFL. Arch Manning might not even be ready to start at the SEC level when it comes to playing for a team like Texas. Steve Sarkisian, I don't think people realized this was a development year. I know a lot of the players on the defense are very experienced and talented, and I thought that they've done a really good job so far this season. However, there's just too much to get done on the offensive side of the football for Texas to be competitive in the SEC, especially at the top tier. Will they beat Texas A&M? I 1,000% give them a really good chance to, but I don't think it's a guarantee at all. So that being said, that's my outlook for the reactions on my SEC conference. The only thing I want to talk about with the Sun Belt is James Madison blew the MFing doors off of Appalachian State. 58-10. They're 1,000% going to win that conference. So now let's talk about the conference championship games. For starters, I'll do the Sun Belt first. James Madison is coming in from the East, and I think Southern Miss is going to win the Western division of the Sun Belt. That conference championship game, quite frankly, will not be much of a matchup. I think James Madison blows them out of the water. And I really do think if we see continued chaos in the ACC and or the American, James Madison is going to be a playoff team almost for sure, because they're going to be 12-1 if North Texas drops a game or Tulane drops a game, or Memphis, East Carolina, USF get in there and win the conference as a 2 or 3 loss team. And so the Sun Belt winner is sitting there at 12-1. I 1,000% think they're going to be the playoff bid. Now, I actually predicted, or not even predicted, but threw out a little caution to the wind, or not threw caution to the wind, but just put some cautionary tales out there that if the ACC had a 3 or 4 loss conference winner, the Sun Belt and the American champion would go. And I stand by that. Let's continue now and talk about the American Conference. North Texas and Tulane are both in the driver's seat. If they win out, they're going to the conference championship game. I think North Texas actually pulls this out. They're going to be a 12-1 team that gets into the college football playoff regardless. As long as Tulane or North Texas win out, they will make the college football playoff. Next, we're going to talk about the ACC. Right now, Georgia Tech has a home game versus Pitt and then a game versus Georgia. It looks like they will be in the college or the ACC championship game. Virginia has a home game versus Virginia Tech. I think that's it. They're going to be in the ACC championship game. I picked Georgia Tech in this game, but Virginia has continuously proved me wrong. I had them going like 6-6 at the beginning of the year. They've done well above that. Then not to mention, Chandler Morris is still a dog. So I like Virginia, but Georgia Tech and their physicality, especially in a neutral site, gives me more poise to take Georgia Tech in that game. Now we're going to move on and talk about the Big 12. I think we're absolutely going to see a rematch of BYU versus Texas Tech. Even though it's on a neutral site, I give BYU a slight increase in their chances to win that game, but I still have Texas Tech. I think Texas Tech is on par with Alabama, with Indiana, maybe with Oregon and USC. Texas Tech can go out there and win a playoff game, especially if it's at home versus a team like Notre Dame. I really like this Texas Tech team. They're extremely physical. Give Jacob Rodriguez the Heisman. I mean, come on. This guy is having one of the best defensive seasons in all of college football history, and he got in at quarterback yesterday and was able to win. I'm really excited to see this Big 12 championship game. I think if Jacob Rodriguez can continue to dominate and some of these other quarterbacks like Ty Simpson and Marcel Reed start to struggle statistically, he could 1,000% get a bid to go to New York. So that's the Big 12. We have 2 more to talk about. The Big 10. It's pretty obvious to me. The Indiana-Ohio State matchup is 1,000% going to happen. Now, Ohio State is in more troubled waters than Indiana. If they lose to Michigan, they lose out on going to the conference championship game. But, in my opinion, they're going to beat Michigan for the first time in 4 or 5 years? I think 4 years. So there's just no way that Ryan Day lets this one go by. I know it's at Michigan, and we said the same thing last year, but Michigan this season has improved. Ohio State is just as dominant. Last year was a little bit more of a fluke game, in my opinion, 13-10. The offense looked extremely sloppy. Now, Michigan fans out there, I know what you're going to say. Oh, you said this last year. Everybody said this all the time. Michigan plays physical football, blah, blah, blah. I get it. Right now, my gut pick is Ohio State. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and you proved me wrong. So congratulations if that happens. But for now, I'm going to go with the favorites to win those games. Indiana has a matchup versus Purdue. Ohio State has their matchup versus Michigan. Those are the two teams that I think are going to go to the Big Ten championship game. Last but not least, the most chaotic conference right now, in my opinion, is the SEC. Ole Miss at a 1-loss, Georgia at a 1-loss, Texas A&M undefeated, ready to run the table and go to the conference championship game. Oklahoma pulling off that upset versus Alabama. Alabama at a 1-loss. In the conference, at least 2 losses overall. Where do these teams stack up? In my opinion, I still think it's going to be Texas A&M versus Alabama. I would really like to see the Georgia-Alabama rematch. That would require Texas A&M to lose versus Texas at the end of the season. That would put them at a 1-loss with a common opponent of Texas versus Georgia. So Georgia would get the edge over them. I believe Alabama would get in because they have the edge over Georgia, so that would be the SEC Conference Championship game. Would love to see that matchup on a neutral site. I know it's in Atlanta, but Alabama travels very well. So that's my outlook for the SEC. Right now, I still have it as Texas A&M and Alabama getting in, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. So that being said, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. I love talking college football. I'm going to drop my top 25 tomorrow, so be sure to tune into that. Thank you again so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.